Hi everybody, Cherie here with a tutorial today on how to shadow flat clusters. Flat clusters, by my definition, is a group of things that are mostly made of paper and that stick very close to the page. So on the screen is an example of a flat cluster that we are providing today for the Layout a Day road trip event, so you can download it over at the studio and you can play along with me, or you can just use the flattened ping version, which is also included. So what I have here is pieces from the road trip Layout a Day super mega collection, and I have put them all in the order that I want them with the shadows that I want, except for the bottom, which is the tag. I did not shadow the tag. So this looks pretty good, actually. The key here is to make sure that your shadows actually look realistic and don't look like they're coming from like outer space. Because if I did this on a real paper page, which I would totally do because this is so fun looking, that staple in the middle would hold everything down really close to the paper. So let's take the piece of lace here, the doily piece. If you look at the shadow, it's very small. I mean, the opacity is only 33%, the distance is 8, and the size is 6. So it's a very small shadow, and it needs to be because the lace is not going to stick up far from the page unless it's bunched up, which in this case it's not. It's just a flat piece of lace. So the same thing with the stamp. The stamp is pretty much flat, so that shadow is going to be very similar to the one that we just showed you. It's a little further away because it's a little further away. I know that sounds punny, I don't mean it to, but it's got the string and the lace and the tag behind it, so it's going to be further away from your page, so the shadow is further away from your page. So if you looked at all of my shadows going up, you would see the same thing happening. Everything gets a little bit further away from the page because of the shadows hanging off the edges. So what I do when I'm finished with this, though, is I take it one step further, which you can do with your flattened ping version or with the PSD version that we provide you. And that is to warp your shadows so that they look like they're moving, or not moving. They have movement, let's put it that way. Like, for instance, the string or the stem of the flower. When we warp those shadows here in a second, it's going to look even more realistic because they're coming off of the page in an angle, the shadow is, which makes it look really cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my group. I just pushed Control J or Command J on a Mac, and then turn the bottom one off so I have this to work with. And now what you can do is you can put your shadows on their own layer and then play with them from there. The doily I'm not going to mess with because it's a pretty flat shadow and it's going to stay the way that it is. The stamp, because it has the staple in the middle, I am going to warp that a little bit. So over here in your layers panel on the FX, you right click and you say create layer, and that will put your drop shadow on its own layer beneath your stamp. So we could turn that off and on and you can totally see the difference there. So we're going to make it so that it's coming out from the staple so that it looks like it's pressed in where the staple is. So Command T or go to transform, and then up at the top here we're going to select the warp transform. And what I'm going to do is this little edge here seems like it is coming off the page, so I'm going to pull the shadow a little bit there, and also right up here I'm going to pull it just a tiny bit up there. You're not going to be able to see it much, but it's going to change here. And then where the staple is, I'm going to push the shadow in a little bit so that it looks like it's coming close with where the staple is and further away where the stamp goes away from it. Once you're satisfied with what you're doing, go ahead and click your check mark or enter, and now you've got a warped shadow there. Same thing for the flower. I'm gonna warp the stem of the flower, the shadow, not the stem itself, but the shadow of the stem. So again, I'm gonna right click on the FX, create layer, and then transform with the warp tool my shadow for my flower. So here I'm going to just pull this down a little bit so you can see where the stem of the shadow is moving, and I'm going to pull this one up a little bit so that it looks like it's closer where the staple is. And then I'm just going to warp just a tiny bit up here at the top so that it looks like it's coming off the page like that. A little bit makes a lot here, so you don't have to go bananas, but it does make for some really cool effects. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to warp the shadow of the string, especially where it hangs off the page of the tag. So again, right click, create layer, and then choose your shadow layer. Make sure you're on your shadow layer before you start warping things, or things are going to go bananas. Transform with the warp tool, and then pull, I'm going to pull this one down a little bit so that it looks like it's coming off the page, and I'm going to pull this one out a little bit again so it looks like it's coming off the page. And I could push these a little bit in where the staple is again, but I think this really does the trick. And when you push OK, you can really see the difference there where it looks like it's coming off of the page of the tag. So that is a great way to work with flat clusters. Remember to start, just as a recap, start with flat or very small shadows, work your way up from the bottom to the top, and then for the extra oomph, take your shadows onto a separate layer and warp them slightly so that they look like they're coming off the page. This will make such a huge difference in your little paper flat clusters, and I hope that you enjoy this tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to tag me at the studio. Otherwise, I'll see you around the web. Bye.